Hello, students. So I've been looking through your papers, and obviously I've put comments on all of them. Um, and I just wanted to record a little bit of a video to go over one of the big things that I saw in your papers. And um, excuse the noise, I'm in a coffee shop and it's loud, and this video is kind of last minute, but I wanted to address this before you guys got into revising your papers over the weekends. So I think that the sort of forensic comments that I put on your paper, like, hey, work on MLA formatting, work on the annotations. I think those forensic things can be looked at, can be easily addressed by going back through the videos on MLA formatting and going back through what's required of you in the annotations. So if you need help finding those resources, like maybe you forgot to watch those, or maybe, just as you're revising your paper, you need to do a watch of those videos. So there's this thing, videos to help with paper number 2. There's also here. These two are where I would go. Annotations. There's a video put together that says, this is what I'm asking for the annotations. And it's really specific and it's put together. MLA. Again, there's a video for MLA. Now, if you're using citation machine or you're copy and pasting from a resource, you can't assume that it's correct. You have to check it against the Purdue Online Writing Lab. And I don't want to get into this too much in this video, but make sure that you're doing these little checks to help you revise your paper, right? So this is the resource right here. You're going to look and say, oh, I got a book. Professor Stevenson told me that it's not in the right format. So what am I missing? A lot of times when I looked at these were actually like small misses, like punctuation marks, right? So make sure you look at that, okay? There's a video on it, and then there's this resource. So make sure, regardless of where you got the citation from, that you check it from what's actually correct. Okay, now the bigger thing I wanted to talk about is making and researching your topic intersectionally. I think that a lot of you struggled with that, and it's actually not surprising to me that you struggled with that. It's actually a very hard thing to do. So what I wanted to do in this video is go over some ways that you can maybe add a couple of resources, or take away a couple, like a lot of you were like, I looked at this from a religious aspect and a political aspect, or I looked at this from a woman's aspect and a man's aspect, right? And think about all the discussions we've gone through. How is that not intersectional? Like just looking at it through two lenses, right? White men are affected by this issue differently than black men and Hispanic men. White women are affected by this issue differently from black women and Hispanic women and Muslim women. So thinking about that, what I'm asking you to do is to put a little bit more of that nuance back into that research, right? Instead of flattening out these identities, look at and ask the big question, how does this affect people differently? And so one of the things that I started doing is I just started Googling, right, water crisis and intersectionality. Like that actually Googling these things, your topic and intersectionality, might help you find some resources. And maybe it's not, in fact, a resource that 100% talks about your topic and intersectionality, but maybe it brings in a perspective. So here's this one, Flint, Michigan, and the intersectionality of ecofeminism. Obviously, you're going to vet this website, like what is this, an intersectional feminist magazine from University of Pittsburgh. You've got to be able to make the claim that it's a credible resource. So that's something. But you read it, maybe you read through it, and what you find is that, like if you're writing about the Flint, Michigan water crisis, that it actually helps you understand this. But then maybe it also that it helps you understand it in a more intersectional way, right? So like here, about 2/3 of the Flint community is non-white. If Flint were middle to upper class, primarily white community, state officials would not have exposed Flint to residents to topic water for over half a year. This activist, so you might even find links to other articles. This activist claims that it has a racial element to it. So maybe you're like, aha. So all of a sudden, just in here, we've found like a rabbit hole of research. And we can look at this. So that's for the water crisis, right? Now, the refugee ban, Muslim ban, travel ban, call it what you wish at this point, I guess. No pun intended. So I start researching this, right? Here's one of the things. There's a bunch of scholarly articles on here. And you just have to start looking at this. Here's an interesting thing. Refugees, race, and gender. And I look at this. Right? And it's going to take... sorry. So I get to this article. It's from 2001, so it's definitely older, but it might help you gain some perspective because it looks like this paper examines the intersectionality of race, gender in refugee situations. How does that help you think about the travel ban, right? Maybe it doesn't, like it's from 2001, it doesn't actually help you 100%. It's not about the travel ban, but it's about the history of, or it's an examination of intersectionality of race and gender in refugee situations. So it's going to talk about how women from different populations are differently affected by their refugee status, right? So that is going to be totally helpful for you. So, and maybe that's the other thing too, is maybe the ASU library system doesn't actually help you. Maybe you have to go with Google here, but researching your terms in intersectionality, or even, right, like Dakota Access Pipeline. Maybe I want to look and think about that with class. And right, class is something, I'm going to get classes about it. I'm going to look at this, but here's teaching about the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and the battle over an oil pipeline. And it tries to explain some of this. It's a lesson plan, so maybe it helps the view from two sides, who's fighting. So maybe it helps understand the tribes and the different communities and what the neighbors say about the protests. So there's a lot of stuff here. So what I'm asking a lot of you to do, who I'm like, hey, they're, you know, especially when I'm looking at the evidence I'm looking at for intersectionality is that you make this strong case in your synthesis essay. So your synthesis essay is like, I have gathered all this information, and here's how I have framed it in an intersectional manner. Like, I've looked at this, I've gotten, you know, the sort of more privileged aspects of this. I've looked at the less privileged aspects of this, and here's what I understand about the issue now, right? And that in your synthesis essay should show me that you have an understanding of your topic as intersectional. And then the other part that I'm looking at to evaluate this are your annotations. In that section on your annotations, the contextualization, where you say, this source helps me present my topic as intersectional because X, right? I'm looking that you have some of, like, yes, a religious aspect, a white male perspective, you know, a racial aspect, a gendered aspect. I'm looking at that to be pieces that you put together of a puzzle. If it's all, here's a white male perspective of gay marriage, here's a white male perspective of gay marriage, or here's a very privileged perspective of gay marriage, right? That's something to definitely consider. So, like, even when we look at the topic of gay marriage, um, we understand that all of a sudden there's all of these articles that are like, hey, wait, we need to look at it from an intersectional perspective. So, this one's about male privilege, um, gay marriage and intersectionality, women's rights, the LGBT movement, The New Black, a film on race, same-sex marriage, and intersectionality. Like maybe you want to watch that film, but there's definitely more complexity to the issue when you look at it from these multiple perspectives, right? Now, some of your issues, like I totally get if you're not trying, like I totally get not every issue can be looked at from a million different perspectives. But if you're trying to get at even rudimentary how this affects people from different classes, different races, different genders, even ability levels. So, like, think of, right, the travel ban. Think about the think about the older people. Think about, you know, people who are coming here for surgeries. Um, think about, right, there was a family who couldn't travel with their toddler who's having surgery here in the US. So think about all, like that's something to think about when you're thinking about the travel ban and refugees, how this affects people who have, you know, disabilities or different levels of abilities in terms of age even, right? Like there's a couple of stories coming out that talk about how older people were held for a really long time, um, and they need their medication and things like that. So these are all just things I'm trying to throw up in the air and hopefully to get you to like replace two, like I guess that's something. If you're like, what should I do to revise this? I would say that for a lot of you it might be looking at your source list and deciding, you know what, like these 6 sources are fine. They help me present the issue pretty good, but I need 2 other sources. Like maybe I need a source that really discusses and gets in on gender in my issue. Maybe I really need a source that gets in on race in my issue. Or maybe you have a source that really talks about this is what intersectionality looks at in my issue, and that's fine. So it might be replacing 1 or 2 sources to get at this from how it affects people differently. And I'm going to keep saying that, how it affects different people differently. Okay? So yeah, so again, this stuff is hard. Am I looking for perfection? No. There's a lot of evaluative things that I'm looking at in this annotated bibliography. So I'm looking at MLA. I'm looking at your annotations. Have you summarized, evaluated, and contextualized your source, right? I'm looking at the format of all that kind of stuff. And then I'm looking at your synthesis essay. So if it's not 100% amazingly analyzed intersectionally, does that take you out of A range? My question is, is there an attempt? And that would be the question. So there's a lot of things that I'm evaluating all at once, but I want you to be trying to make some sort of attempt. So as you're revising your papers this weekend, remember, go over the citation stuff, easy stuff to fix. Go over the annotation stuff, right? If I said you never evaluated the source, go over that. Make sure you can look at that. And then finally, right, look at the intersectionality stuff. Replace a couple of your sources with sources that give a more intersectional look at your topic. All right. So I'm looking forward to finally reading these in the final. And that's about it for me. So have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you all later.